Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Finish More Music podcast. So, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by a music producer who I admire greatly. I have a huge list of his tracks on my hard drive from both a musical perspective, but also the production quality is always outstanding. So, over the moon to be welcoming Mr. Steve Bug to the show. Thank you so much, buddy, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
So how have you been? We were talking a little bit about moving studios and so on, but as someone who's a label owner, a very prolific artist, a DJ who tours, it's been obviously a very different year. How have things been for you?
Um, yeah, basically hard financial wise, and also like getting adjusted to like a new lifestyle. I mean, without being able to see people, without being able to travel, without being able to play music for people, and it was something that I highly enjoyed, and it suddenly was taken away from all of us. I mean, and yeah, but on the plus side, I really enjoyed being in the studio, and I kind of, I think, I had these moments where I was sitting in the studio and I thought, like, actually, it's funny because you finally have this time, and you can work on so many different tracks. And usually it was like you have like a few days every week, and you're trying to come up with like a finished track, like in a month or something, whatever. But and suddenly you had all this time, and it really was a big booster on my creativity. And also, I think, yeah, I mean, I wrote an album that was like basically the first thing I've done in the pandemic, and now I'm back into like the dance tracks, and I've learned so much. It's crazy. It's just like on this part has been amazing, the studio part.
So you're kind of all amped up now, ready to be able to get back on the road with new music and all of those things. So it's in some ways a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, I've been lucky enough that I had some savings, and I had the studio move, so I had to get rid of some gear that has been lying around for some years as well. So that also helped me to buy food and be able to survive financially. But yeah, on the other side, it's a fun part that has been missing, and it's great to finally see and the light of the end of the tunnel, and be able to probably in the summer, maybe after the summer, I have the first party in Croatia that might happen in August. I think this is maybe the first one for me to happen. By then I'm vaccinated, and then so yeah.
Ready to go. Awesome. So if we look at a time where it would be your normal day to day, so not in fact, maybe we'll do both. I think this could be fascinating. So what would a day look like when you would be DJing, and just like that general week, for example? So not necessarily if you've got a DJ that evening, but in terms of getting your studio time, obviously running the label. It's a hugely popular label, Poker Flat. You've got the DJ, and you've got the production, you've got all the different management stuff. What does a day look like for you? And what I'm really interested in is, do you have any creative habits or rituals when you're like, right now I go in the studio, that get you into the mood to write a track? How does that all play out?
Mm, I mean, so let's start like where we came from the routine before. Uh, it was changing over the years, and I think one of the biggest changes for me was when I started to work with an engineer, that finally gave me the chance to not think of the mixing and not think of putting effect or like putting the sound in the right place already, just writing music without thinking of anything else than just laying down harmonies, melodies, some beats and whatever. So that changed my workflow a lot. So for many years, I've been doing it mostly like this, that in the morning I've been either doing like some labor work or some sports. I love doing sports since many years. It changed. Now I'm stuck with climbing, and I think this is probably the one I'm going to be stuck with for the rest of my life. Before, I used to sometimes go swimming for like a few years, and beach volleyball in the summer, and running and stuff like that. But like climbing, I feel is the most full body workout. And it's also a bit of a mental approach, because you have to think a lot how to get up and how to move your body, how to place your body. I love that aspect of it. So twice a week I would go climbing, bouldering, and all the other mornings I would be doing labor work, and then usually after lunch I would go to the studio. And I figured, after I started working with an engineer, that in 4 to 5 hours a day I could easily get things together that are enough to finish a track, and just laying down ideas on the first day and then go back on another day and finishing the rest. And yeah, on the weekends, of course, I've been traveling, coming back, and usually Monday starting the same routine over after Sunday evening. I've been very good at swapping from nightlife to day life, which a lot of my DJ colleagues aren't, unfortunately. But for me, like, I come back from the weekend on Sunday evening, I can go to sleep at midnight or 1 o'clock, and then Monday I'm up at 8:30, and then I'm into the stuff that I'm doing during the week. Yeah, then the pandemic came, and it of course gave me free weekends as well. and then I decided to even just treat the weekend as normal weekdays, and add a climbing session on a Saturday or Sunday, and also do more sessions in the studio. Unfortunately, I had the studio move, which took a lot of time in between, and that was probably my low time during this period. But yeah, it's basically not much has changed, because I'm still, like, in the afternoon, I still feel like this is the time where I'm most creative, and sometimes I'm back in the studio in the evening after dinner, or like I miss out on dinner because I just stuck in something, just listening to something. But I figured that I don't add much in the evening if I worked on the thing all day. It already happened, and in the evening is mostly enjoying what I've created and not really adding anything to it. I still wasn't able to leave the studio sometimes. But so yeah, I usually, it's this 4 hours in the studio.
Okay, cool. So when you go into the studio, do you have a set idea in mind of what you're gonna create, or you just sit down and something happens? What's your approach?
Yeah, mostly I'm just sitting down and see if I can come up with something, and it's usually I'm figuring out this pretty fast. In 1 hour I already know if I gonna have something or not, like, because most of the things already happen to me in 1 hour, and then I start changing some sounds maybe, and getting more into details. But the main idea is usually written pretty fast for me. But of course, there are times where I feel like, for example, 2 days ago, I listened to, I think it was Brother. Brother was posting something about creating a house beat, like making a tutorial of it for his Patreon fans, I think it was. And I listened to the beat, and I was like, oh, this is a cool beat. And then I listened to Robert Hood posting a new track, some very minimal techno track. And basically, I went to the studio. I thought, I didn't even want to go to the studio that day, but I thought, like, man, I haven't done any minimal techno-ish tunes. This sounds great. So I went to the studio, and I ended up making a very housey beat, more from the types of the video that I saw from Brother. So, like, I had this idea of making the techno track, ended up making like some housey beats. so it doesn't always help, but so yeah, sometimes I do have a vision that there's a direction I want to go into, but most of the times I'm just playing around and see if I can come up with something. A lot of times it helps to open older tracks that I've already been working on, that I haven't been able to finish, and then you can, like add stuff. Maybe you feel it's a day-to-day to be working on this. This is the great thing about modern technology, that you are able to go back on everything, like mostly with 100% of how you say, what's the English word for it? Recall, with 100% recall on everything, because how it used to be, I think it's also a part of the change of my my daily routine and my production routine, that before I had the mix on the mixer, like, so I've been mixing on the mixer instead of in the box. I used, after I started using an engineer, I started to just use my console as a summing mixer, which was a shame because this is a huge mixer. It's still great sounding. You don't have to use the EQs to make it great sound. I still prefer to go through a mixer. But yeah, being able to, or recording my synths while working on the track, and then being able to go back to any track at any time, that was a big change, because so many times you get stuck into something, you don't know how to continue, you don't know what else to add to it, but you still like feel you have to finish it. And then I used to work for sometimes a week or two, or sometimes 3, with gigs in between, and then your mindset is changing all the time, and you still haven't finished this track, and you can't open up a new project because the mix is on the mixer, and it's very it used to be very painful. And I love that I'm able to work on 3 tracks on one day without destroying anything that I created before.
And how many tracks, I mean, like, for example, now have you got that are in a state where they're tracks that you're going to finish but they're not finished yet?
Whoa, that is a good question. It's hard to say, but it's definitely I'm already at the state where I have more ideas laid down that I have in last year, the year before, and especially the years before that. I've been on a creative high the past years anyways, but still, like, I mean, the year is still young, and there's so much time to write new music. And but also something I figured, that I'm very good at laying down ideas in the beginning of the year, and for some reason this changes when the summer comes, the summer arrives, like in June, July, then I'm able to finish these tunes. And this was the same last year and the year before, and I don't know why it is, but
that is the first time anyone's ever said anything like that.
Yeah, I know.
A different part of the year for a different part of the production process.
That's, I know, cool. It feels awkward, but that's what it is. I can only, I can only go with the flow. It's really hard for me to finish stuff in the early months of the year. I don't know if it's because it's gray outside, or I feel super creative, but like I just can't finish these tracks. And so yeah, this year I've been very lucky with having a lot of great ideas, and I can't wait to finish them. Now I'm already started to finish a few of them, and yeah.
Do you finish everything that you start?
No, not at all. I mean, there's sometimes like going from one idea into the next, and then I'm using the same sounds, and then I don't even want to finish the other track, even though if it could be a good idea, if I can't change the sound into something that doesn't sound exactly the same sound wise, then I probably don't finish it. But there's also a lot of playing around for me, and I think this is what is very important for everyone who's trying to come up with great tracks, that you give yourself time to explore and try things out, and you don't always have to come up with something that's worth releasing. It's like, but it's easy to say in times like this, where in times when touring is full on, and your booking agent is asking for your new releases, and you don't have the time. You already, I had a lot of conversations about this stuff with other colleagues that, you know, like they had like 3 to 4 releases a year, which is not, if it's like strong releases, it's already a lot, but still the agent been pushing on, you know, you have to release more, and you know, it's not that easy. You can't always come up with something that you feel like you want to release, especially not if you only have a short period of time due to touring. So yeah, I prefer to release less instead of releasing everything, or like really having to release so much. But I'm at the lucky position right now that I have so much great music that I can choose from. But I know other times where you would release something where you're probably like a 90% happy with, but not like 100%, and you just couldn't finish anything that you would be happier than with this one, and you thought like, okay, now it's time to release something. I just have to release it, and maybe I'm just too picky about my own stuff or something. So
Well, so what I'm hearing is and I love this. It's this idea of you go in the studio and you play creatively, very open to lots of new ideas and influences and so on, and then you'll write I guess a whole selection of different ideas, and then you pick the ones of those that you want to work on. Is there a point where a track gets to a certain stage where that's it, that definitely won't ever be abandoned? I've gotten this far down the road with it, so it's in the this is getting finished no matter what pile?
I mean, yeah, I I do it's funny, I do recordings on my phone to be able to listen wherever I am, just to go through files that I've recorded. And I do some live arrangements, like muting, either on the mixer or just on the computer. And I found that this is very helpful to listen to it from another perspective at times where I'm not like in the studio trying to finish something, or, you know, like working on having to work on music, just, you know, anywhere. And the, a lot of times I find stuff where I'm like, okay, this is great, it's awesome, it doesn't need anything else, and this is one of the next thing I'm gonna finish. I even started to send out this unfinished ideas to my label partner, or people at the label working for us, to see like what they think. And then you know it's worse, or I'm sending it out to friends as well. It's yeah, it's also giving you a lot of pressure, like to finish it. If people say like, hey, this is cool, you should, which I don't need, but it's an extra aspect of it. And yeah, I think this is the point where I decide that I should finish it and I should release it. Yeah.
Cool. So what I'm hearing, I love this idea, is you have I mean, is a sketch, I'll call it a sketch, is it like a loop for you, or could it be longer than that before you start to, you know, jam with it on your desk, just to get a feel for how it could sound as an arrangement?
Yeah, it's mostly it's a loop. It's depending on like what I have. The length varies, of course, but yeah, it's basically a loop that I enjoy listening to. And then I'm pretty good at visualizing my arrangements. So I already know like kind of what I want to do with this with the track. And then sometimes I think over the years I got really good at not over producing. I mean, I come from a very minimal way of production, basically because I didn't have much gear, and also that was a sound that I liked. But for a while, I used to put way too much into tracks for my feeling, for my understanding, and I had to get rid of stuff after when I started to arrange. And this is something that lately, over the past few years, I've been very good at just getting the right amount of sounds and the right amount of drums to be able to arrange it. And then I don't like super big buildups and a lot of little thingies that happen here and there and this and that, just to, it makes sense in some tunes, but I really like when it works without this elements. When the loop already works for me, like usually an idea is worth finishing when I have a loop that I can listen to for hours and I don't have to change much. Just take out the hi-hat, put it back in, take out the kick drum, put it back in, and everything just steady, keeps you attracted to the sound and the groove and yeah, I think that's for me, that's important.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of the things that I guess in some ways is a secret to the production quality as well, because your tracks are not swamped in loads and loads of things. So all of the sounds are really crisp. They've got their own space in the mix to breathe. And I mean, I've got a bunch of questions on this about the keeping it interesting and all of those things. But I guess the first thing that strikes me is, on the one hand, you mentioned playing, and I know you said on a video when you were talking about your album that you had played with an ARP and like something had come out of it and you weren't sure, so there's this kind of happy accident serendipity stuff. But what I'm wondering is where the balance is with that, because I'm imagining, and I might be wrong, that you're quite deliberate in your sound selection so that they all have the space.
Yeah.
How does that balance play out in the studio, the letting go of stuff but also the making sure it's crafted to fit where you want it to fit?
That, I think that's something that came natural with my birth certificate. Is it? I don't know. It's something I thought about it many times, especially when doing the masterclass for these sign guys. It's really hard to describe. It's just happening for me. I know what I have to look for, and I without nowadays you have all this visualization of soundscapes and stuff, and so it's very easy to see where your gaps are that you have to fill in. But for me, it was always pretty clear what I wanted to feel. I don't want to say my tracks sound perfect at all or something. I'm still like learning after 30 years into it, and I love that fact that you're still able to learn new stuff and new things and get better at what you do after all these years. And yeah, I just think it's maybe it's also because my music is rather minimal, even though like I wouldn't consider it as minimal, because like there's still like a bass line and a synth line. It's not just one line that does both in most cases. In some cases it is, but yeah, so I think on that, having that said, if you have like a lead sound, then it's of course you need a bass sound, and then I'm looking for a bass sound that maybe if the lead sound has a lot of low mids, and I'm looking for a bass sound that doesn't have a lot of mids and stuff like this. But this comes very natural. It was always there without even thinking about it.
Do you limit your tools before you start? So I know you used sort of Arturia, and I'm going to risk trying to say the name of the album without falling over my words. Right, Never Ending Winding Roads.
Yeah.
Right, nailed it. I was expecting myself to go to mess it up, right? But I know you use like the Arturia software, and you were talking about using drums, for example, from Logic, but you also have hardware. Are there any creative constraints that you know you're going to work with when you walk into the studio, particularly as in your last studio, you said you had a lot more gear to choose from?
No, I think it was more of a natural selection. Like one day, I would start with creating some beats, and then I thought it needs now, it needs a bass line, and then I would go to the Moog for the first try, and then maybe go to the Uno. I love the Uno for bass sounds as well. So yeah, it's really depending, trying out synthesizers when it's coming to hardware, and with software, it's I don't know, it's different sometimes, because I'm basically just trying things out, and also with a lot of hardware synthesizers, even on a Moog, you can play amazing chords, which I love to do, because it's like a monophonic, but you have 3 oscillators, so you can create your own chord and then just play it on the keyboard. And so it's just maybe what I'm looking for, what kind of sound. I know like which kind of synthesizers I like to use for chords, and for what kind of chords. And but also I figured over the years that some of the bass lines I already loved. I always loved back in the days. At first I thought they were created with a 101, and then I thought maybe it's a 106 with a bit of chorus on it, and then I thought maybe it's a Moog, and then I figured it's a CS80. And so it's like also this kind of exploring, and I have a love for the old school sounds, for the early Detroit techno, Chicago house vibes and stuff, because this is when I got into it. And I still think that this, it's basically also disco music and funk music synthesizers. But yeah, I kind of dig these sounds, and I know, like, at least I think I know where certain sounds come from, and what but I know exactly like what I want for a sound, and then I go into this synthesizer and use it, and then I can make it at least sound the way I want it to sound, even though the original sound would have been produced by another synthesizer or something.
Right. Okay. I'm with you. So it's so you know your equipment, and you go, okay, I'm going to go for this kind of sound. You know where you're going to go for that, and then that's when you just start jamming and playing for the patterns and the feel of the piece of music. Is that right?
If I know what I want, like that's why I was saying, like, when I sometimes I start with creating some drum loop, and then I feel like, okay, I should try out, maybe put on some chords, or put on like a cool bass line or whatever, and then I take it from there. But sometimes I'm also, as I've been saying before, I like to experiment, and so I just open any new plugin, or like if I have a new synthesizer, I just sit to the new synthesizer, turn it on, and then try things out, and then things just happen. And I think it's there's a saying, like I don't know how the beam goes correctly, but it's about like buying new synths versus understanding 100% the synths you already own. And there's some truth to it, and I'm sure that I love simple synthesizers, the Prophet 5, the Moog, Mini Moog, and synthesizers that don't have, or I use also the studio electronic stuff that have a bit of a menu already, but also quite simple. And I figured that I love that. I don't like stuff that's too complicated, because I want to know what I'm doing, and I don't want to get lost in the menu, and it's stopping me from being able to be creative, instead of adding something to. So I rather try to find a workaround how to make it sound more interesting than just like the Uno 60 or something like this, because it's always going to sound like a Uno 60, like the Moog is always going to sound like a Moog, but you can still add some stuff and make it more alive and stuff like this. Yeah, but so I think it's great to know your own synthesizers and know what they're capable of, but it's also important to at times get some new gear for inspiration and just play around with new stuff. And because it's a different aha effect sometimes,
Uh-huh.
you like, oh my god, this is just, and then you're like, wow. And this is excitement is something that you rarely get from a synth, inside out. And I think it's important to have these excitements in the studio, and then even if you don't finish the track, but just this excitement, it's very important to have to create something, I think.
It's interesting. So one of the things I really wanted to sort of dig into a little bit, as you mentioned, been making music for sort of 30 years and keeping it fresh and keeping it interested. So one of those ways with new bits of gear, are there any other ways that you sort of deliberately put yourself out of your comfort zone to, where the magic happens, so to
Uh,
speak?
Yeah, you asked before if I sometimes limit myself to certain gear or something. There's been times where I do this. I created a series called Loop Hotel, a very unsuccessful but great tunes, to be honest. But like it was already at the time where vinyl was a bit going down. It was more of a vinyl series back then, and it didn't have my name on. And I always loved to come up with stuff like this, but this was maybe a bit too late or too early. Right now, probably could be more successful releasing something on a vinyl only without having a name on. It could be interesting. But yeah, for this series, for example, I said I'm only going to use certain synthesizers, and I even going to produce 2 tracks on the same beat. So both sides had the same beats. I didn't change anything on the beats. I used the same synthesizers, but I changed the lines that I played.
Uh-huh.
And that was very interesting for me to see if I can come up with something completely different, even though using the same elements. And yeah, but basically when I'm working in the studio, sometimes I'm limiting myself, but mostly for jams. I sit down and I connect the 303 and the 606, and I just have a little jam. And unfortunately, I never record these. I should. Many people, I recorded some videos, and people were like, "Oh, you're gonna release this?" And I'm like, I didn't even record it, and I lost everything afterwards. Yeah, so sometimes I love to do that. For the production, I love to have the options, even though I always wish to write an album with like a very limited amount of gear, but right now I just don't feel it. So
Yeah, it's interesting. So it wasn't that long ago I did a podcast on this, talking about creativity and connections, which is very much what you're talking about. I'll limit myself to that gear, so almost starting with a concept, because some of the things that I like to do as well is relate maybe music to a memory or a picture. I'm quite a visual person, so
yeah,
I find a lot of inspiration from finding an interesting picture online, and then that can speak to me about types of sounds and moods and different things like that. Is there any
oh
other
wow,
experiments and things that you do to drive that kind of stimulus?
that's a pretty interesting approach. I kind of like that. Maybe I should try it. Um, for me, it's more like the everyday inspiration, like it's first of all, when I moved to Berlin, I felt like a total different way of inspiration than from the times I lived in Hamburg. It changed a lot the way it changed a lot the way my music sounds. And yeah, I think I don't, I usually don't have a concept like you saying, like taking this picture or something. It's mostly like everything that happens around me influences me. For my album, for example, it was of course it's a very melancholic. I mean, I love melancholic stuff anyways, but like it was definitely coming out of due to the situation that we all been sitting at home, and like the whole world being upside down and stuff like that. And that the whole whole other important stuff gets pushed in the very background, and for a certain amount of time it was looking like now everything that counts is this pandemic, and everything else is going to be like pushed away for the next 20 years. And but obviously this is not the case. It maybe even accelerated it. But yeah, it's I think it's for me like more the general situation, the general feeling. For one of my albums years ago, I got the message that one of my oldest friends that we have been disconnected for a while, that he took his life, and I wrote this track that finally was a part of one of the albums. I don't know which one it was, but like, you know, I definitely took this straight into the studio, and but without like saying, and now I want to write a song about it. It just comes out. It's something that to me happens very natural. Sometimes I have a good climbing session, and then I come back and I feel like inspired, and then put like maybe some, I don't know, it's hard to describe what it sounds afterwards, but I personally, I know like why it's gone or taken this direction or something like that.
So that's really interesting. So there's a bit of a juxtaposition, which is cool there, in that you mentioned the influence of Detroit and Chicago, and that appears sometimes kind of deliberately in sound selection and choices, and then there's the non-deliberate, almost subconscious side. So I guess it's like the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, which is just taking what's around you and the influences and the mood and the feeling, and those two things are marrying up to, you know, take your experiments in certain directions.
Yeah, probably.
Probably that's what it sounds like anyway. It's really cool.
It does sound right. It does sound right.
Okay, so we need to talk about the Instagram dance.
Oh yeah, the dance.
Before we move forward.
Yeah.
So you obviously posted a clip on Instagram of you like in the zone, is a good way I think of putting it, when you're making one of the tracks, and dancing around the studio. And so I'm curious, given also that you mentioned the rock climbing and the physical side of things that you're interested in, how that marries up, whether you're constantly moving around in the studio and dancing, because I know that there would be a lot of people who are writing music. It could just be on a laptop or just sitting on an iMac, whatever it might be. And it can be quite a prone position, but writing music that's meant for people to dance to, which even saying it out loud seems a bit weird, but it's quite an easy thing to do. So how important would you say bringing that physical aspect of moving around into the production process is?
I mean, in general, I'm as you said, I'm a very physical person. I used to be dancing before I got into house music, and I didn't want to become a DJ the first 3 years of being clubbing, even though I was making tapes for friends at home already, making a lot of mixing tapes and stuff, and been buying records already from the first time I went to a house club. But yeah, so like the physical part was something that attracted me when I got into this kind of music. And so even when I'm DJing, I know a lot of DJs, they don't move at all, and I always find it weird because I can only see it from my perspective, and to me it's very important to dance, to be able to dance and to move, and this is the reason I didn't want to change sides for a long time, because I didn't want to lose the momentum in being in the music and being able to dance. And I kind of found a way for me to do both. And I'm kind of not like dancing, but I'm kind of moving around a lot when I play. Unfortunately, the computer took a bit away from this because I'm playing with Traktor. But I'm still enjoying all the extra features that I have over CD players, for example. But having that said, to come back to the studio, when I had the bigger studio, it was moving around was a part of the creating, and so I was standing in front of the synthesizer, something I can do here as well, but the space is much smaller, so there's not that much room to dance. But to be honest, I think most of the times in the studio when I'm writing music, I'm basically I might, like being like moving my head around or something, or like just even do a little fist pump or something, which I basically
Awesome.
don't do on stage usually, not because I don't like to do it to the crowd. I want to do it for myself, like enjoying it. And yeah, I think this video that you're talking about, or like other times I've been like I'm jumping out of my chair, and these are very special moments where I'm like I've been writing music for a while, and then suddenly I'm like, oh my god, this, and then finally the grooves got me, you know, and then I'm getting up and I'm dancing, and you don't need in a lot of space to do so. And it still happens in the new studio. And I always wonder like how one could not dance to dance music when they produce it. I mean, it's not all the time, but at least once in a while, you know, like it's like when there's this great moment, there's a build-up or something that a lot of people create big build-ups, and I can't imagine them sitting there just like not moving around, just, you know,
clicking the
sitting
mouse
at the mouse, and then I'm like, no, come on, he's just really, yeah, you know. So yeah, I think it for me it is a part of it, and I think it should be a part of it. Yeah, but this is just my personal opinion.
Well, I mean, I find that your body's like, in some ways, it's almost a feedback mechanism telling you when the music's doing what you want the music to do. So I think even something like setting a compressor and the release on a compressor, oftentimes I can't guarantee that I could say, yes, Steve, I can totally hear that's right. But if my head is moving and my feet are tapping and they weren't at the other setting, I
Yeah,
can pretty much bet that it's where I want it to be.
yeah, yeah,
You know, so
yeah. It's
I find there's that value in it as well as the excitement, and it's bloody good for you to move
yeah,
around and not sit in a chair for 3
yeah.
hours like a robot.
But also, having that said, the physical part, it's something I used to have in the old studio. I had some huge speakers, some midfield speakers from PMC, the IB2S, and they were giving a lot of bass, physical bass. And it's a different feeling when you're sitting, especially when you're working with headphones, because you don't want to disturb your neighbors, or you have very small speakers which might be very accurate sounding, and you could probably mix very well on them as well. But not having the physical aspect is sometimes, I think it's something that could be missed, you know. I remember like my first productions ever, I didn't have studio monitors yet, which I would recommend anyone to buy studio monitors first and then buy some gear. But because I had some kick drums that sounded like rim shots, just because they sounded great on the hi-fi speaker, but they didn't make any bass. But anyways, this yeah, so I think the physical part, like what's coming out of the speakers, it's something that also adds up, and that's maybe why people in clubs prefer to dance more than in the underground when they listen on their earpods or something. Even though it's the same music, and they probably, you know, like love it the same way, but like it's just the physical stuff. It's yeah,
Feel the air
makes a change.
moving, you know.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
also for the compression. I think that's the thing, you know, if you have good monitors and you can tell, your body can tell there's a difference in the compressor setting, then you know it's a physical, it's airwaves, it's, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. So I'm, in a funny way, I'm going to link the pressure from speakers to pressure and difficulties in the studio. I know it's a weird connection, but it's where we're going. We're gonna flip this around, because it's, creativity is a funny beast.
yeah,
We pick a journey for ourselves that is fraught with frustrations and difficulties one day, elation the next, maybe not even one day. Within 5 minutes it could all change. One idea can change everything. And linking to pressure, you'd mentioned obviously the pressure of having an agent and not much time. I'm wondering, are there any other creative blocks that even after 30 years as an artist, things that keep cropping up for you, and how do you dial them down. Like if it's the voices, you know, the voices in your head make it sound like you're crazy, but you know, we get voices in our head that say various different stories, ways of dialing that down or pushing through it, for example.
Yeah, I mean, even after all these years, is sometimes, you know, questioning your own skills, your own ability of creating music, or, you know, like, I think that's that's pretty every artist stuff that we all go through, and there's always times where you don't feel so creative, no matter what you try, and the harder you try, the worse it gets. So it's I figured for me that I basically stopped pushing. It doesn't make sense at all, and I got more. I get more and more frustrated, and it's not getting me out of the situation. I try to not go to the studio at all, and do something else for as long as I feel like I don't want to go to the studio. And as I mentioned before, has been some years where I haven't written that much music, and that's not only because I've been traveling all the time. It was also because I didn't feel comfortable in the studio. I thought I basically I hated being there. I went there. I thought, you know, like, okay, I have to do some music. And after 1 hour, I was in such a bad mood that I had to leave. And that was like when I first thought of having to get rid of the old studio, because, you know, I felt like I have to change something. I even bought some new gear. It didn't help, and it just nothing would really help me to get over this. And I think what finally got me over is like when I bought a new computer and finally had like a lot of new software that I hadn't before, because my computer was way too old to upgrade. And that was a big turning point. And suddenly, like, this is when it started, like writing all this new music, and suddenly I have all this new tracks lying around. And yeah, I think I can only recommend anyone not to push, but try to go to the studio sometimes. Don't push yourself to finish something. Just try to enjoy being in the studio. I think this is the main part. Like, I'm always trying not to go with the idea of having to finish something. Just I want to be there and listen to some music, work on some music. And if I come up with something, that's even better. But if I just have a great day, then I have a great day. But yet I still have these periods where, like, I even don't like that, and I can't even explain why. And I think might be whatever reason. But yeah, sometimes it might be helpful to get like to talk to a few friends, or even get like some help from someone, or get a new job if you don't get over it. that's probably the last thing you want to do. But yeah, give it some time. Don't force it. I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned, you know, about getting out of the studio and then coming back in, and that wasn't working, but it was a piece of software that changed it. I cannot remember the name of the lady, but somebody did some kind of scientific study on this, and I think, and this seems even crazy coming out of my mouth, but I'm pretty sure your environment has something like 90% influence or something like this on your creativity. It was something really, some crazy statistic. And your first thoughts of environment is like the room that I'm sitting in, but it can be the equipment, the screen you're looking at, even what you're wearing. So I don't know if you've read the book by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic,
Nope.
but she talks about someone sort of quite you know, many decades ago, or maybe even centuries, who talked about the fact that when their creativity died, or dried up, sorry, they would go and get changed into some crazy outfit they had, and that would spark it again. Like just these weird different ways of doing it. And I think another one that's really high on the list is collaboration.
Yeah.
Because somebody gives you something
Yeah.
new that you would never think of coming up with yourself,
Yeah.
and that can kind of put that jolt in there that you need.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something I'm doing when I feel like I can't finish anything myself, just by myself. I start collaborating with people. When I do it with my mate Clay, and now we do it quite before it was more occasionally. Now we do it on a almost regular level, and it's also, again, it's more like, you know, two friends, two old lads sitting together in the studio, and you know, they're just having a great time, instead of, you know, like, we don't have to prove anything to ourselves, or, you know, like, I do more for the outside world than he does, but it's just us jamming, having a great time, and usually this already helps, you know, to get to the next step, and, you know, always trying out something new with someone else, instead of, you know, like, something you never would have tried out yourself. It's always great. Also with Langenberg, I had when we wrote all this music together, that was an amazing time, and we achieved so many tracks that I couldn't have done by myself. And it's, you know, like, it was a great time, where, like, both of us gave so much, and it worked so great, that I think it was, I always try to say, like, if as if we came up with 150%, because it was, or almost 200, somewhere in between 150 and 200%, because both of us were giving so much. That's usually, you know, like, in a collaboration, sometimes you have to take away from you, but we didn't have to do that, and but this is a special. It doesn't have to do with not being able to create by myself, but sometimes, in general, collaborations, I think, are a great way to learn, and to get better at what you do, and you know, like, get a new picture of, like, how to do things.
Yeah, learning a bunch of new skills as well.
Yeah.
One thing I just picked up on that you said, which I'd love to quickly tie into this, was you said you don't have to prove anything to anyone, or something like that, when you were talking about collaborating and just mates having a laugh. For a lot of people who are just starting out, they have concerns about how their art's going to be received and what that says about them. And then, obviously, I'm imagining for someone in your stature, there's an expectation on what's going to come out now, because you've written all these great records. How often does that creep into your creative sessions, and how do you mitigate it if you start to get overly concerned about what other people might say, think, do, write, and all of that stuff?
To start with, luckily, I started in a time where social media wasn't a part of the whole thing, and we were just sitting in rooms making music that we were hoping someone would play out, and it was only released on records. There was no real internet feedbacks or something, you know, like, there's a lot of hate out there, like, when you're releasing stuff somewhere, and then on whatever, YouTube or blah blah blah, whatever. And it's been very very easy in the beginning to just, you know, write music that you would like yourself, and then see, once it's released, then you see if someone else likes it as well. So I kind of come from this point, and I didn't have to. Of course, when I started as a young boy, I wanted Laurent Garnier play my records or something, for example, or, like, I can't think of anyone else, but, like, many of these artists that I respected, of course, I wanted them to like my music, but also, I don't know, I don't want it. I think a lot of people today, they create something that they think other people might like, instead of writing something that they personally like. And I think this is the question that any artist should ask themselves, that what is it that what do I want? Like, what kind of music do I want to write? Like, okay, I understand there's a business side to it now, or at least it used to be. We will see when clubs open, if it's still there is a business side to it. But so it's kind of it's a different approach, and and it might be it might lead to success and to money and whatever, if this is the side you chose. But this is not like the artistic side. I think if you're more from the artist point of view, it's very important to kind of be able to find your own sound and develop your own sound and stay true to yourself and to what you like, and don't give a damn what other people think. There's always going to be people that going to love what you're doing, and these are like your true fans at the end. And if it's only a bunch, that's still a bunch of true fans, instead of some weird people who just like you because you wrote exactly what they want to hear. And once you write something you want to produce, they're already gone because they're going to jump on the next train, like this is like why I'm having a problem with all these hypes and magazines pushing always new sounds and new genres, and magazines now don't have so much importance anymore. But again, it's still like all these pushing of this and that, and it's just okay. It's because people, want to read about something new, and it's exciting also to find something new. But music should be about like what you like or what you don't, and this is basically a bit forgotten in times, especially where algorithms tell us what we should listen next. And it might lead to great music that we actually like, but it's a question: do I really like this, or it's like, do I listen to this music because my friends listen to this or stuff like this? It's I think this is important to find out for yourself, like what is it what I want, and then make your steps in creating this kind of sound.
Yeah, we had I spoke to Nick Muir on the show, and he spoke to this, and one of the lines he said, paraphrasing it a little bit, but it really hit home for me, is he said that I realized that I don't have any right to other people's opinion about my music. Once it's out there, I don't get to say what people will or won't like. So I write, and obviously he a lot of collaborations with John Digweed, so that's a filter almost that says, no, let's change it to this. But even when it's his own music, it's like I don't have a right to what anybody's going to think about my music once it's left the studio. And I thought that created a really beautiful line between the moment where you let it go out into the world and it's free now, and you've lost your ownership, like legally, yes, it's mine, control, but actually it really isn't mine anymore. And I think a nice way of looking at it is maybe it was never yours in the first place, because the ideas flow through us, like you said, happy accidents, and not totally sure why it sounds like that. It's in my environment around me that I don't control. So maybe a nice way to look at it is it was never really mine. I just had an idea that flowed through me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I often like to consider when, because I get a fair amount of abuse and grief online as well. You sort of mentioned on YouTube, I put everything from tutorials out on there to videos talking about creativity, and lots of people don't agree. And as you said, social media is depending on where you are, like my hate of Twitter is well known by now. There are people who are almost lurking on there waiting to try and rip pieces out of you. But tying into this idea that you mentioned about you're going to have your fans and your people who like the music that you like, is to operate from that place of service and say, well, if I play small today, then the people who need to hear my message, or who will have the escape of listening to my music or the enjoyment, are not going to get that. So rather than worrying about me and what people might say to me, let's worry about the people who I do get to positively affect, who are waiting for my next record or to hear my gig in the club and me to do my best to turn up on my A game. Let's make it about them and not me. And I find that can be a nice way of switching it around if the weight of, oh God, how will this be received, starts to turn up during the creative process.
No, exactly. I mean, it shouldn't be a part of the creative process at all. But of course, sometimes, like now I'm pretty solid with these. But a few years ago, it was a bit when like we had the peak with the Trent Miller album on Poker Flat, and you know the first big hype of the label was a bit like over, and then I chose some artists with smaller names, and I chose music that I knew was not like perceived by the same people than before, because we were like kind of in this tech house beginning of the tech house boom, and very functional tracks, and I like this music, listen to it back now, but I'm also happy that I kind of made this change with the label, and also in my DJ career, I rather play for a crowd of 200 people than to a crowd of 15,000 people, when I can play what I want to play. And I've been at a point where I had to play, or at least I thought I had to play music that, you know, it's still like I play only music that I personally like. I don't buy anything that I don't like, but your way of DJing changes when you play for bigger crowds, and you have to attract people that may not be familiar with what you're about musically. And so I think it's, in general, as a new artist, it's very important to build your own fan base, like start with small people, start with small parties with your own friends, you know, like build a small community around you, then have your friends bring you their friends, and, you know, like grow slowly. There's a lot of people being thrown in the Shark Tank just because they had one big hit on Beatport, or basically these days it's a bit different already, but now it's whatever it is that pushes people from zero to hero. But it can be very stressful, and also it's very hard to stay on this level, because you have no level to fall back on. It's just you went from here to there, and the next thing, it might be back there, like back to zero, because like if you can't keep up with like having hit after hit after hit after hit, people gonna be like, okay, thank you, that's it. But if you build up like a strong relationship to, you know, fans from the scratch over years and years and years, then, you know, if there's a little hype in between, it's also being lucky. It's not always that you can choose this, because, you know, like you're writing the music that you write, and sometimes it might happen that you just explode as an artist. But it's, yeah, I think it's healthy to grow slow, and to take your time, and develop your sound, and develop your skills also in the clubs, and not only as a producer.
I love that. This idea of sort of organically growing, staying true to your sound, and attracting the people who resonate with your sound. And then if you were to blow up, as you said, you know, you write a huge tune, the world of creativity, anything could happen. Even if things don't quite work out, you've still got your crowd who are there, instead of it all being sort of stripped away from you. I think that's great. What are your thoughts, just to round this out? Obviously, as a label owner, on the self-releasing route as well. So there's obviously Bandcamp, and personally, I'm a big fan still of the labels, and the fact that there are people there to nurture you and help you and steer you, and take a lot of the heavy lifting on the promo side, for example. Not saying you don't get involved in it, but I still like that route, particularly as starting out. But I wondered just what your thoughts are on the balance. And if, let's put it this way, if you were starting out now, what would your approach be?
Yeah, I think it would. I would probably start to send out some music to other people, and see if they like what I'm doing, and then, you know, see like how it goes from there. But if not, I think I probably would come to the point where I would think that I would love to surround myself, if I wouldn't have if I didn't find a platform at this point already where I feel at home, and where I'm surrounded by artists that I personally like, and I can, like enjoy what they're doing and grow with them together. I think this is something that's very important. Either you're running your own label or like being a part of another label, being like a part of a small growing community, and like a creative home, like for your music and for yourself, and be able to exchange I started running my own label because I love the idea of featuring other artists and surrounding myself with like people that I personally liked musically and personally, and help them grow as well. And I think labels are still very important when it comes to this, to developing your career. It's a lot of people wouldn't say so, but I think from my point of view, it's the wrong approach to. I mean, for example, let's say you say, okay, I don't need a label, I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need all this shit, I just release my stuff on Bandcamp. Like, how much better you have to be than all the other people that release on Bandcamp, because it's already like a huge amount of artists releasing their music, and also known artists that release their music. You may make more percentage of your music, but also you're only on Bandcamp. You're not like in any other store. You're not on Spotify. You have to find a distributor to get there. It's not that easy. You could get there, but it's a lot of work to do that. If you with a label, you already have a platform that has a followership, that has knowledge on how to promote music, on how to build careers, on how to help you, like finding an agent, for example, or whatever. Some labels even have their own agency. And I think it's still important. Labels are still important, and will be in the future, because not only as selectors, but as helpers of like building people's careers. And I'm very grateful that many people that are quite popular right now have been passing through my labels over the years. And I just been like putting together a compilation of Audiomatique history, label we put asleep a few years ago. And I was just blown away by the music they released, and also like the artists, how many artists are there that are now like in the top league, and we kind of discovered them in the beginning. We were some of the first to pick them up, and it's a great feeling, to know like being a part of the past of someone's career. It's a good thing to speak from label owner perspective. And I think this is a relationship that if you choose the right label, then it's very helpful for your career.
Yeah, totally. I want one last question on this, which is just as a label owner yourself. I know that a lot of people think, well, if I send my music to labels, they're never even going to listen to it.
True.
A lot of music does come through. Obviously, connections and knowing people at the label and potentially getting an introduction is a beautiful, ideal way to go.
Yeah.
Is it worth people sending their music to established labels and it just landing in the inbox, or is the chances really that diminished from your point of view of even getting it heard to start with?
Yeah, I think with the amount of music out there these days, it's pretty close to zero to be discovered by someone. I remember I used to have a Wednesdays reserved for listening to demos, and that went from 5 to 10 tapes, CDs, or whatever it was at the time, to like thousands and more of thousands of tunes that it's just been impossible to listen to. And also because many people did send out their music to labels where the music didn't even fit, so you had to go through so many tracks that weren't even close to what you released, just because they were so desperate in releasing their music. And this led to labels being unable to listen to all the demos, and I'm sure we're missing out on many great tracks. And but I don't know any way how to deal with this or how to cope with this, and how to yeah, we even like have someone at the office pre-selecting, but also this person already doesn't get, like, because the next bunch of demos is already there, and it's never ending. It's impossible. You have to be rather lucky these days to find the label that listens to your demos. And I think I would always try to make contact when you play, when some of your artists that you like, or that runs a label that you like, passes by your city, then make contact. Better not give them a USB stick. This might disappear in the back. Just, like, make contact. Just, like, say, hey, blah blah blah, nice to meet you, I'm this and that. And then a few days later or a week later, write like somewhere in the socials, write a message saying like, hey, we met at the club, blah blah blah, nice to meet you. And as I said, I also do music, and maybe you have the time to listen to my track. I think it's probably now I'm getting bombarded with tunes on
We'll
the
cut this
socials,
bit out for you, Steve.
this door just closed right now that I spoke this out. No, yeah, I think I figured like this is the way that I still listen to people's music that I haven't known or heard of before. Giving a face to it, it's very important, I think, these days, knowing, like, as a label owner, oh wait, this is this person, like, he sounded like he has an idea of what he's doing, so maybe I give it a try. And yeah, it's way harder than at the times than I started. And it's probably better to, like, as I was saying before, maybe if no label picks you up, maybe try to find like some likewise minded people and start your own little label, and again, build your own small community. And then at one point, when people, they probably approach you and say like, hey, whenever you want to send some demos, I have ears open. And then, you can make the next step. This is probably the way I would do it. If no one picks my music, then I would probably try to find some people and build my own little label and see how it goes.
It's a brilliant piece of advice there. It still means so much, that face-to-face time in this world where so much is online, but actually getting out and meeting people and presenting yourself and being professional, and making sure that if you are gonna make contact, your music really is a good fit for the label and it's in the right zone quality wise. They're all super important things to do. So brilliant advice, thank you. Well, look, you have been superb, thank you so much. And I know you spent a lot of time in the studio, and your creativity's been on a high. What can we expect from you coming up?
Where are we now? As you know, like, it's always taken months until release is coming out that you've been working on. So I think, the one with Cleo and Poker Flat is released by now, and then there's the remix just has been released today, probably a few weeks from now when the podcast is released. This is a remix I did, and then for Cacao Music, the Keen Brothers label, two very nice guys from Panama City, who I used to play for their party years ago on a boat party. One of the best parties that year was hysterically this moment that I remember from there. And then also there's another remix I did for Dolo and Com to be released on Akadub. It's more like a Dolo and Com classic, I think, that's gonna be re-released on vinyl and digital. Also, there's a vinyl compilation. I give a track to Bondage Music with a lot of other artists, Marcus Hom, Mihai Popovicio, and the whole artist roster. I always loved, the deep dubby style they're doing, and I had this track actually the day they asked me, I was in the studio writing this track, and I was like, okay, wait, this perfect match. So I gave it to this compilation. And then there's a few more remixes from the 20 years celebration that's been going on for at least 2 years, if I remember right, maybe even 3, because we got so many people wanted to be taking part of it. It's the last one as an EP with mixes by Sven Tasnadi, who else? Lele Sacchi from Italy, and Mia Popovicio. Exactly. That's the 3. And then I'm working on some other stuff right now that's probably gonna be released after the summer. This is like all the bigger tunes I've been talking about before. At least I have a very good, I wrote this one track, and I just listened to it this morning again. I haven't been listening to it. It's not 100% finished, but it's very simple, and I showed it to the first people, and I was like, it's crazy. I have this when I listen to this, I have this feeling that this is going to be huge. That the last time I had this was when I listened to the finished version of Loverboy, and I might be completely wrong. And as I said before, it's like I don't care. Personally, I'm super happy about this one, and this was just me trying like some new stuff from the Roland Cloud, and it just bam, it was there, and now it just needs some vocals, and it works as an instrumental, but I think with vocals it could be a great tune. And yeah, some other stuff as well coming up. Stay tuned.
So this was one of those tracks you put on this morning, had you up doing the funky dance, right?
Exactly, but that's more in the living room, like, just from a shitty phone. So actually having that said, I don't need the physical aspect of the speakers. I can even listen to something good on the phone and do the funky dance.
That's amazing. Well, I think that's a brilliant place to leave it. I mean, I'll 100% be keeping my eyes out for your new releases. As I said at the top, I'm a genuine fan of your music. I've been for years. I absolutely love it. It's awesome, and you've been superb. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. It was a pleasure.
Take care, Steve, and look, we'll get you back again sometime soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.